What if I told you some of the greatest Hollywood movies of 1967 were completely forgotten by time? Films filled with legendary actors, brilliant storytelling, unforgettable atmosphere, and cinematic magic. Yet somehow they disappeared from mainstream conversations. But today, Globewise Entertainment is bringing them back. These are movies that deserve a second chance because hidden inside them are performances, emotions, and ideas that still feel powerful decades later. So before we begin, subscribe to Globewise Entertainment and join our community of true movie lovers who believe real cinema never dies. Now dim the lights, sit back, and prepare to rediscover Hollywood's forgotten treasures. Back in 1967, Hollywood released a Western that had everything audiences usually loved. Giant action scenes, legendary stars, explosive robberies, and sharp humor. But somehow, the war wagon slowly disappeared into the shadows of bigger Western classics. Starring John Wayne and Kirk Douglas, the film follows two completely different men forced to work together for one dangerous mission, robbing an armored wagon carrying a fortune in gold. What begins as a simple heist quickly turns into a tense battle filled with betrayals, gunfights, and clever strategy. But the real magic of the movie comes from the chemistry between Wayne and Douglas because every conversation feels entertaining, funny, and unpredictable. Unlike many serious westerns of its era, the war wagon mixes adventure with charm, making it feel surprisingly modern even today. Audiences back then may have overlooked it because westerns were beginning to lose popularity, but modern viewers often rediscover it as a hidden gem packed with classic Hollywood charisma. It's exciting, stylish, and proof that old-school cinema still knows how to entertain. In 1967, Hollywood released a romantic comedy unlike anything audiences had seen before. The Taming of the Shrew brought William Shakespeare's classic story to life with explosive energy, starring the legendary Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. But this wasn't a quiet or elegant love story. It was loud, chaotic, emotional, and filled with fiery battles between two strong personalities who refused to surrender to each other. Set in a beautiful Renaissance world full of color and drama, the film follows the fierce and rebellious Caterina, a woman feared for her temper, and Petruchio, the bold man determined to marry her no matter the consequences. What makes the movie unforgettable is the chemistry between Taylor and Burton because every scene feels dangerously real, almost like watching two storms collide. Despite its incredible performances and lavish production, the film slowly faded from public memory over time. But today, many viewers see it as one of the boldest Shakespeare adaptations ever made, filled with humor, passion, and timeless cinematic power. In 1967, while Hollywood was still making traditional westerns filled with simple heroes and villains, Hombre arrived with something far more powerful. Darker, smarter, and emotionally deeper, this forgotten classic starred Paul Newman in one of the most underrated performances of his career. He plays John Russell, a quiet white man raised by Apache Indians, a man rejected by both worlds and forced to survive in a society filled with prejudice and hypocrisy. When a dangerous stagecoach journey turns into a brutal fight for survival after bandits attack, Russell becomes the only person capable of protecting the terrified passengers. But what makes Hombre unforgettable isn't just the action. It's the tension between morality and selfishness, courage and fear. The film slowly reveals the ugliness hidden beneath civilized society while its silent hero carries more emotional weight than most modern action stars. Even though critics respected it, the movie slowly disappeared behind bigger Western titles. Today, many film lovers consider Hombre one of the smartest and most emotionally powerful Westerns ever made. Some movies are forgotten because they failed. Others are forgotten because they were simply too ambitious for their time. Ulysses is one of those films. Released in 1967 and inspired by ancient mythology, this epic adaptation tells the legendary journey of Odysseus, the warrior trying to return home after the Trojan War. But this isn't just an adventure filled with monsters and battles. It's a haunting story about survival, temptation, loneliness, and the painful cost of destiny. As Ulysses travels across dangerous seas, he faces seductive sirens, terrifying creatures, and impossible choices that slowly test his humanity. The film carries a dreamlike atmosphere, blending grand visuals with emotional storytelling that feels almost hypnotic. Back then, audiences expected faster action and simpler narratives, so the movie never gained the recognition it truly deserved. But today, viewers who rediscover it often describe it as a forgotten fantasy masterpiece filled with imagination and poetic beauty. It's the kind of movie that quietly stays in your mind long after the credits end. Most westerns romanticize heroes and gunfights, but Hour of the Gun does something completely different. Released in 1967, this haunting western tells the true aftermath of the legendary gunfight at the OK Corral. Instead of celebrating violence, the movie focuses on revenge, trauma, and the emotional destruction left behind after bloodshed. James Garner stars as Wyatt Earp, not as an invincible hero, but as a tired man consumed by grief after the murder of his brother. Alongside Doc Holliday, played with cold intensity by Jason Robards, Earp begins a ruthless journey to hunt down the men responsible. The atmosphere feels tense and almost tragic, turning the Wild West into a world filled with paranoia and death rather than glory. Audiences at the time expected exciting shootouts and heroic adventure, but the film's darker psychological tone confused many viewers. Over time, however, Hour of the Gun earned respect as one of the most mature and realistic westerns ever made, a forgotten masterpiece that showed the true cost of vengeance. When people hear the name Casino Royale today, they instantly think of the dark and serious James Bond films starring Daniel Craig. But long before that version existed, Hollywood created something completely insane in 1967. This Casino Royale wasn't a normal spy movie. It was a wild, chaotic comedy that turned the entire James Bond world upside down. Featuring a massive cast including David Niven, Peter Sellers, Ursula Andress, and Orson Welles, the film follows multiple fake James Bonds trying to stop a mysterious criminal mastermind. But the deeper the story goes, the crazier everything becomes. Secret agents, bizarre gadgets, surreal humor, psychedelic visuals, and non-stop madness fill nearly every scene. Audiences at the time didn't know what to make of it because it completely ignored the serious tone of traditional Bond films. Critics were divided, and the movie became known more for its confusion than its creativity. But decades later, many viewers now appreciate it as a bizarre cult classic filled with fearless experimentation and unforgettable energy. It may not be a perfect film, but it's definitely one of Hollywood's strangest forgotten adventures. In 1967, Hollywood transformed one of Broadway's biggest musical hits into a clever and energetic comedy that audiences slowly forgot over time. How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying follows the hilarious journey of J. Pierpont Finch, a young window washer who discovers a strange self-help book promising success in the corporate world. Using charm, confidence, and pure ambition, Finch begins climbing the business ladder at shocking speed, manipulating office politics while pretending to be the perfect employee. But beneath the comedy and catchy musical numbers lies a sharp satire about greed, power, and the absurdity of corporate culture. The film feels surprisingly modern because many of its jokes about office life still work perfectly today. Audiences back then enjoyed it, but as decades passed, the movie became overshadowed by larger Hollywood musicals. Yet modern viewers who rediscover it often call it one of the smartest and funniest forgotten comedies of the 1960s. It's stylish, witty, and filled with the kind of charm that classic Hollywood delivered better than anyone else. At first glance, Fitzwilly looks like a simple family comedy from another era. But hidden beneath its warm humor is one of the most charming forgotten films of the 1960s. Released in 1967 and starring Dick Van Dyke, the story follows Claude Fitzwilliam, a loyal butler secretly running an elaborate criminal operation to protect the wealthy elderly woman he works for. The catch? She has no idea she's completely broke. To maintain her luxurious lifestyle and keep her happy, Fitzwilly and the household staff begin stealing expensive items, pulling off clever scams, and outsmarting authorities without ever letting their secret collapse. What makes the film so enjoyable is its balance between heartwarming emotion and playful comedy because the characters genuinely care about each other despite their ridiculous situation. Audiences back then may have overlooked it because it arrived during a changing era of cinema, but today it feels like a comforting hidden treasure filled with intelligence, warmth, and classic Hollywood magic that modern comedies often forget. In the late 1960s, Hollywood began experimenting with darker and more surreal storytelling, but few films captured that psychedelic era like The Trip. Released in 1967 and written by Jack Nicholson, the movie follows a television commercial director whose ordinary life begins collapsing after his marriage fails. Searching for escape, he decides to experiment with LSD, expecting freedom and enlightenment. Instead, he enters a strange psychological journey where reality slowly melts into hallucinations, fear, beauty, and emotional chaos. As the night continues, the line between fantasy and truth completely disappears. The visuals become dreamlike, conversations feel distorted, and every moment carries an unsettling tension that reflects the confusion of an entire generation during the counterculture movement. Back then, many critics dismissed the film as controversial or dangerous, while mainstream audiences avoided its bizarre style. But today, The Trip is often viewed as a fascinating time capsule of 1960s psychology and rebellion, a forgotten cult experience that captures both the excitement and terror of losing control of your own mind. Before vampire movies became dark, serious, and filled with gothic tragedy, the fearless vampire killers arrived in 1967 with something completely unexpected: horror mixed with absurd comedy and surreal imagination. Directed by Roman Polanski, the film follows an awkward vampire hunter and his clumsy young assistant as they travel through a snowy Eastern European village haunted by mysterious disappearances. Soon, they discover a castle filled with strange vampires, bizarre rituals, and terrifying secrets hiding behind elegant walls. But instead of becoming a traditional horror story, the movie constantly balances suspense with hilarious chaos, creating an atmosphere that feels both creepy and strangely playful at the same time. Audiences back then didn't fully understand its unusual tone because it wasn't scary enough for horror fans and too strange for comedy lovers. As a result, it slowly faded into obscurity. But over the years, viewers rediscovered its visual beauty, gothic atmosphere, and unique humor, turning it into one of the most beloved cult vampire films ever created. And that wraps up our journey through 10 forgotten Hollywood movies of 1967 that truly deserve a second chance today. These films may have disappeared from mainstream conversations, but their stories, performances, and cinematic magic still remain unforgettable for those willing to rediscover them. From psychological mysteries to Western epics, surreal comedies to emotional dramas, every movie on this list proves that great cinema never truly dies. Now we want to hear from you. Which forgotten 1967 movie surprised you the most? And what hidden classic should Globewise Entertainment explore next? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more underrated masterpieces and untold Hollywood stories. Until next time, keep discovering the movies the world almost forgot.